that being said, I do want to ask this question about Claudia Sheinbaum.
Sure.
And what you're talking about, like opening up this area. Do you feel she's an extension of AMLO? Or do you think she's going to be a little more lefty liberal?
This is interesting, okay? Like, all right. So AMLO, first of all, let's talk about AMLO a little bit. AMLO did something that I would have not thought possible. I mean, he's a long campaigner. He's been in this since 1988 when he was a supporter of Cardenas. Cuauhtemoc Cardenas ran for president, and he may have been one of the young militants who urged Cardenas to seize the National Palace when they all marched past it in protest over the stolen election. And like, that was a stolen election, purloined in plain view. Nobody had any ambiguity in their minds at all about what happened in that election. For you to remember it, the computer crashed. They're announcing results. They're giving you the projection shows Cardenas winning. And then the computer crashes. And then a day later, when the computers come back up, shows a different result. De la Madrid, who was president, has admitted afterwards we faked it. Like, we didn't think we could turn over power to Cardenas. We feared instability, and so we just fed fake numbers into the system. All right, so AMLO campaigned all of those cycles in Cardenas's tradition, in the party that Cardenas helped form, the PDR. PRD, I'm sorry.
I know what you're talking about.
It was volatile. One wonders whether the 2006 election was also stolen. There are reasons to think so. There are reasons to be skeptical. It looks like a kind of a low intensity fraud to me. But so AMLO keeps campaigning. He keeps campaigning. And he does something before the 2018 election, like 5 years before. He breaks with the PRD and starts to construct his own political party, Morena, Party of Moral Regeneration. And he does something that I would have thought impossible. He constructs a viable political party out of whole cloth, and he starts to rebuild the working class movement from the top down, not from the bottom up, right? You would hope from the bottom up, right? But he sort of, the working class has been thoroughly defeated. It's been smashed. It's been destroyed. Any power that it had has been disseminated, completely deconstructed since the neoliberal turn of the 1980s. And he starts to rebuild something. And not only that, he wins a landslide. This is just old style campaigning. AMLO went, in the years running up to the 2018 election, AMLO visited every fucking village in Mexico.
I believe it.
Often more than once.
I believe it.
He went out, he pressed the flesh, he hugged everybody because he's a very hands-on kind of politician. He took a selfie with AMLO. He made speeches. And in this process, he convinced people that he was authentic and legitimate and not a corrupt politician in the pre or PAN mold or even the PRD mold. And of course he won in a landslide, right? He and his political allies won. Now, he did do certain things leading up to that election that raise eyebrows on the left. And one of them was that, his two coalition partners. One is the Worker Party, the PT, a party that has hammers and sickles. And
Yes,
stuff,
I see the billboard. Do you know how odd it is,
yes, I do.
Brother Lancaster, to see
How
these big
wonderful it
billboards?
is, actually. How wonderful it is. So the PT is legit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're a hardcore left
Yes.
party. And AMLO has never been afraid to stand on a stage with his PT allies beside him, flying the hammer and sickle flag, right? So there's like, let's think about what kind of politician he is, right? And where he came from and his commitment to some kind of a left vision, right? His other coalition party, though, is the PES, and I've got a party of Encuentros Sociales. It's a weird evangelical conservative party.
Okay.
Not very large, but you know, they so he has these two allies, one on the left, one on the right. And that was the coalition. And when he was challenged on it, you know, he always said, look, I mean, the kind of transformation that I'm envisioning is too big to be exclusive. It's too big to just to say you can't be part of it because we don't like your ideas. We want a broad spectrum. And all right, so that gives rise to all sorts of problems, of course. I mean, he's AMLO punted the question of abortion and gay rights and gay marriage and stuff like that in 2018. And he said, you know, we'll talk about it later, basically.
He Obama'd him.
We'll talk about it later, but we're not going to do it right now. Meanwhile, the courts are deciding these things all in one direction. You know, you know, maybe he was right because he was worried about losing conservative Catholic voters in small towns and rural villages. And so, you know, given the kind of political coalition he wanted to build, he may have been right. He also inflamed the NGO activists early on in his presidency. And I write about this in the conclusion. But, you know, the NGOs had been running social welfare programs that the government basically paid the NGOs to do various kinds of medical and social welfare programs. And AMLO looked at that and said, no, this is a bad use of state money. Like, public services should be run by the public, not
to give people an example. I don't think there's any state-run, if any, I think there's one state-run orphanage in Baja, in northern Baja, where I am.
Interesting.
I believe it's all run by churches.
Probably, but in this case, you had feminist and gay NGOs, and Walmart had one of the biggest NGOs in Mexico. Oddly,
sounds about right.
Walmart had an NGO that used state money to help families of children with disabilities or sicknesses, and so on. And you know, so AMLO looked at this very convoluted and complicated arrangement where the state was spending money to support private organizations and said, no, we're going to pull the plug on that. Like, we're going to fortify the state's capacity to deliver services. And in the future, whatever NGOs offer will be of a non-governmental variety. Now, this inflamed a lot of NGO activists. And they never let it go. They never forgave him for cutting them off. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons that you saw, you know, feminist riots on International Women's Day every year thereafter, up until the last year. It was part of an elaborate payback by NGOs and NGO activists. So here you've got, you know, all right, so Gloria Scheinbaum, to come back to Claudia Scheinbaum, come back to to the question you actually posed, and not the one that I wanted.
We
to
need
answer.
context. Hey, this is a show. Look, first of all, this is the Saturday free show where we can go over an hour. First of all, second of all, these things need context.
That's your context. All right. So here's the promise. Here's the promise. I think. Does Claudia Scheinbaum keep the farmer, peasant, working class base that AMLO built and add to that left-leaning members of, or re-add back to that, because they were lost, re-add back to that the PMC left, the professional managerial class left, that belongs to NGOs and activism and international circuits and so on, right? Can she add those back and thereby win another landslide election where there's a constitutional majority? And that's what we're waiting to see. My read is that she's certainly got the attention of the NGO types, and she's got their support, right? So we'll see how God bless her. I hope she prevails, right? I had worried that having a Jewish woman run for president would be too much for a deeply Catholic culture. And I had wondered about that, but that doesn't seem to have developed. Like, that doesn't seem to be the case. People, like, she wears that ponytail that echoes the way ordinary indigenous descended Mexican women dress. She dresses like a respectable office worker.
That's a really good analogy.
It's not fancy dress.
That's a good analogy.
It's a typical woman office worker. And when I look at the scenes of her campaigning, the way ordinary working class and lower middle class Mexican women embrace her, it's like, oh yes, honey, you're one of us.
Those aren't fancy. Look, there's no polo stores here. Right. And she's not going across the border to pick up any designer stuff. She looks like a bank manager.
She looks like a lower level middle management. And she also gives off a vibe. I don't know how to put this, right? But like, sometimes she gives off a vibe that, like, she wouldn't be bad to work under. Like, if you were being managed by her at the workplace, she wouldn't be horrible.
She would give lots of pizza parties.
So here, look, I mean, she's stiff, and she's kind of like, I think, I don't know if you watched the debate. I watched the debate a couple of weeks ago, and Galvez, her PAN pre-PRD coalition. That's right, because they all got in bed together, right? All of the other political parties in the country formed a coalition to try to stop her, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Galvez kept saying, "You're a cold and unfeeling woman," and like, that is literally, eres una mujer muy fría y sin sentimientos. So something like that was the exact phrase. And so there is, so she is a bit stiff. She is a bit cautious. She speaks slowly. AMLO also spoke very slowly.
I mean, she's a scientist, though, right? If I'm not mistaken.
She's a fucking physicist.
She's a Nobel Prize winning physicist, right?
Is she? Like,
she's a Nobel Prize winner.
I don't remember that, but maybe she was part of a team that won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe
she's a very look. All right, she doesn't wear this learning on her sleeve, like, she doesn't show it off, right? She's very careful not to show off, right? Mm-hmm. Because that would be unseemly, and it would also be,
it would be off-putting.
You got the base to think about here. Yeah. But so yeah, she's an extremely accomplished woman who's devoted her life to politics, who could have easily had a career as an extraordinarily well-paid scientist, and instead she has devoted her life to politics, and she hasn't gotten rich in the process, as far as anyone can see. And another snarky remark by Galvez after the debate was something like, "Well, if you haven't," I think Scheinbaum said that she lived in an apartment, and Galvez said she lives in an apartment, not a house. So, like, if you haven't acquired assets by the age of 60, don't you think you're a little bit slow? Eres un poco way. You're a bit of a slouch, don't you think? But that, like, let's be clear, that does not hurt her in the polls.